Welcome to the shadow frequency, where the veil between this world and the next grows thin, and the things that whisper in the dark are given voice. From the cryptic candlelit studios, deep in the Indiana forests, your host, Matt Wilson, and his spectral producer, Juniper Ravenwood, unearth the forbidden, the forgotten, and the fearsome. So, still your heart, dim the light, and listen closely. For once you tune into the shadow frequency, you may never tune out.
Welcome back to the Shadow Frequency. I'm Juniper, and tonight the air feels damp, old, and just a little too still. The kind of night where every hollow in the woods sounds like it's breathing. I hope everybody's settled in, lights low, doors checked, coffee close by if you're brave, because tonight's file has claws in it, and tusks, and a cave, which is always a bad combination unless you are actively trying to ruin a peaceful evening. All right, I got tonight's episode here, and the label reads 342, the Ozark Monster, Tusks, Caves, and the Vanishing Body. Tonight, we're heading into Searcy County, Arkansas in 1897, where a Little Rock businessman named William Miller claimed he helped track down a monstrous creature locals called the Gowrow. The reports describe a 20-foot dragon-like beast with tusks, web-clawed feet, horns along its back, and a tail ending in a blade-like point. It was said to live near caves and water, to slaughter livestock, and to make a terrifying sound in the night that gave the creature its name. And then, as every good nightmare does, the story gets stranger. The creature was supposedly killed by a posse. There was allegedly a photograph. The body was reportedly sent to the Smithsonian, and then it vanished from the record. Chris, I want to start with you on this one. A cave monster in the Ozarks, a newspaper account, a missing body. What do you make of the Gowrow?
June, I love these cases because they sit right on that old line between folklore and something that maybe somebody really did see. The details are so specific: tusks, webbed feet, the blade on the tail, that it doesn't feel like a vague campfire monster. It feels like somebody was trying to describe a thing they could not quite explain.
Exactly. It has that too strange to be tidy quality. It's not just big and scary, it's weird in all the right ways. Matt, what about you? Does this feel like a tall tale territory, or are we stepping into something that may have had real teeth?
I think it's both, and that's what makes it work. The Ozarks are full of caves, water, deep woods, and old stories. Maybe the newspaper polished the legend, maybe people exaggerated it, but the thing at the center of it feels like it came from a real fear. Something was out there in the story, whether it had scales or not.
That's the perfect doorway into this one. A monster may die in a newspaper, but a legend can keep moving underground. And with that, Matt, let's step into tonight's case.
You are tuned to the shadow frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. Hosted by Matt Wilson, produced by Juniper Ravenwood, with Chris Beach. The darkness continues.
Thanks, Juniper. This one has that old mountain story electricity to it, the kind where the line between newspaper report, campfire warning, and something crawling out of the rocks gets thin in a hurry. So let's open the file here and step into Searcy County, Arkansas, late January of 1897. We're in Calf Creek Township near Blanco, with the Ozarks rising around those scattered farms and dark folds of timber and stone. Think creek beds, cave mouths, steep ground, long nights, and neighbors close enough to pass along a warning, but far enough apart by the time help arrives, the thing in the brush is already gone. The name people were whispering was Gowrow, and even that name feels less like a label and more like something heard before it is understood. A throat-deep sound moving across the hills after sunset. According to the old account, animals had been found torn and missing, pets had vanished, livestock had been slaughtered, and the fear around Blanco had grown so thick that it finally reached a Little Rock businessman named William Miller, who supposedly walked right into a story that was already breathing in the dark. Now, Miller is important because he becomes the bridge between frightened local rumor and public legend. He He was not introduced as some faceless hermit wandering out of the woods with a jug and a monster tail. He was a businessman from Little Rock, traveling through the Ozarks, and that gave the story a certain strange weight when it appeared in the Arkansas Gazette on January 31st, 1897. And here's where I'm going to pull something from the file. I've got a reproduction of that Gazette material here, the piece usually remembered as the Green Gowrow killed in Searcy County, along with the illustration by Elmer Burris that was said to have been based on a photograph. Now that detail matters, not a sketch from pure imagination, not just a cartoon monster tossed onto the page, but an image tied to the idea that somebody, somewhere, had once pointed a camera at the thing. That is the kind of evidence that never quite steps into the room, but it stands right outside the door, knocking once, then going silent. Miller's account says he learned that this creature had been making nightly raids, and the people around Blanco were beyond tired of finding what was left behind. So a posse forms, as these stories always seem to demand. Men with rifles, men who know the land, men who have probably hunted bear, tracked deer, followed hog trails through thickets, and read broken brush the way some people read a newspaper. But this trail leads them somewhere worse than a den. It leads them to a cave. And the cave, according to the legend, was littered with bones. Animal skeletons, yes, but also the suggestion of human remains, which changes the whole air of the thing. Dead cattle can make a community angry. Human bones make everyone lower their voices. Suddenly the Gowrow is not just a nuisance or a predator. It becomes a creature with a territory, a feeding place, and maybe a history that started long before Miller and his men ever arrived with guns. And then comes the scene that makes the legend stick under your skin. The posse waits near the cave, expecting the beast to return. And somewhere nearby, close to water, they hear it. The story says the Gowrow came out from a lake or watery place with enough power that the earth itself seemed to tremble as it moved. Imagine being one of those men, crouched in the cold Ozark dark, trying not to breathe too loudly, listening to something huge push through the night towards the cave mouth. Then the thing appears, 20 feet long, 2 tusks, large webbed feet ending in claws, a row of short horns down its back, a thin tail with a blade-like end as if the animal had been designed by every fear the hills could hold. It is dragon, reptile, river beast, boar-tusked nightmare, and cave predator all at once. And for a few seconds, those men are no longer hunters. They are witnesses to something that should not have survived into the modern age. The fight, if we trust the legend's own pulse, is brutal. The posse opens fire, volley after volley, and the Gowrow does not simply fall like an ordinary animal. It tears up trees, it thrashes, it rips the leg from one of the men before the rifles finally bring it down. This is the detail that always catches me because it gives the creature weight. It is not merely glimpsed crossing a road or described from across the field. The story insists that it fought, that it injured a man, that it left damage behind. And when they examine the body, the description becomes even stranger. The tusks, the claws, the webbed feet, the horns, the bladed tail. It sounds like a thing adapted to water, caves, and violence. A creature that could slide through creek bottoms, vanish into stone, and come out after dark when farms were quiet and lanterns were low. Even if no one knew where it came from, the body itself supposedly said one thing clearly. This was not supposed to be here. And then, because every good monster story knows exactly where to place the trapdoor, the remains disappear from the record. Miller reportedly claimed the Gowrow's body was sent to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., but it never arrived, or at least no official specimen surfaced to close the case. That is where the story changes shape. If the body had been preserved, labeled, measured, and placed behind glass, maybe the Gowrow would be a zoological oddity, something explained, filed, and stripped of its power. But a vanished body is different. A vanished body becomes a question that keeps breathing. It lets the cave stay dark. It lets the photograph stay just out of reach. It lets people wonder what was really dragged from that Ozark Hollow in 1897 and whether something also remained behind in the stone, listening. So by the end of that first account, we have a dead monster, a missing body, and a story that should have ended, but absolutely did not.
That missing body is the part that makes my skin crawl. It's always the thing that almost became proof and then slipped away.
And that illustration, supposedly tied to a photograph, that is the bit that really hooks you. It's evidence, but fogged over.
Exactly, Chris. And in the second half, we're going to follow the Gowrow after the killing into Vance Randolph's folklore, the beer keg eggs, Devil's Hole, the tall tale twist, and the uncomfortable question of why this monster refused to stay dead. Juniper, Chris, back over to you.
Some monsters disappear because they were never real. The Gowrow disappeared because someone said they had the body.
So far, we've got a monster in the Ozarks, a cave full of bones, a posse with rifles, and a body that supposedly left Arkansas and vanished before it ever reached Washington. I have to wonder what you're thinking right now, because this one's one of those stories where every explanation still leaves a shadow behind it. Chris, take us on into the break.
Thanks, June. I'll be honest, this Gowrow business is exactly the sort of story that makes you think twice about poking around in a cave, isn't it? Tusks, claws, a tail like a blade, and then the body disappears. That's proper nightmare fuel with an Ozark accent. While we're here in the dark, do us a favor and like and subscribe on whatever platform you're using. It really does help the algorithms find the show and push it toward more people who enjoy strange stories from the edge of the map. You can also find us on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Rumble, and all the major podcast directories. Head over to shadowfrequencypodcast.com for every episode, the companion blog, merch, show notes, and links to every platform. You can even support the show by buying us a coffee on the website. And while you're there, send us an email or leave a voice message. We may play it on a future episode. June, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Chris. Now it's time to fire up the Spectral Cosmic Message Materializer. I'm flipping the switches, watching the little needles twitch, letting the static sort itself into something almost readable. There it is, a thin strip of message paper, throwing out like I got pulled through a haunted fax machine from 3 counties over. Let's smooth it out and see who found us through the fog tonight. This one comes from Tamara in Maine, and she writes, I listen on Amazon Music while I'm working nights for a logistics company up here in Maine. Most of my shift is spent in the little dispatch office with warehouse doors opening and closing behind me. And when the building gets quiet around 2 or 3 in the morning, your show is perfect company. I'm especially into the cryptid episodes in the hauntings. Anything with something lurking in the woods or standing at the end of a hallway gets me every time. Keep doing what you're doing because it makes those long overnight hours feel a lot less lonely and a lot more mysterious. Keep the freight moving and the shadows watched. Tamara. Tamara, that's fantastic. First of all, a quiet logistics office in Maine at 3 in the morning already sounds like the opening scene of an episode. Second, thanks for spending those overnight hours with us. Cryptids and hauntings are absolutely our kind of freight around here. And remember, if you'd like to reach out to the show, send us an email at shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. We love hearing where you're listening, what topics pull you in, and which stories keep you checking the corners of the room. Chris, I'm going to turn it back over to you for a little shadow news.
Thanks, June. Tamara sounds like she's got the perfect listening setup. Night shift. Quiet building. Doors moving in the background. That's asking for a shadow to walk by the window. A former Army Staff Sergeant says a brief encounter during a military training exercise in Oregon back in 1993 changed his life forever. Todd Nice claims he and other soldiers saw 3 towering, human-like creatures standing as tall as 9 feet. And the experience later led him to found the American Primate Conservancy. Nice says recent reports out of Ohio do not surprise him, noting that eyewitness databases rank the state among the nation's biggest Bigfoot hotspots. June, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Chris, and that really does fit tonight's theme: strange people, strange creatures, brief encounters, and the kind of moment to follow someone for the rest of their life. Whether we're talking Bigfoot in Oregon or the Gowrow in Arkansas, these stories have a way of surviving because someone comes back changed. And now we return to the Ozarks, where the Gowrow did not remain just one dead monster in one newspaper report. They grew legs, eggs, tunnels, and a whole second life in mountain folklore. Matt, take us deeper.
The Ozarks do not need castles to make dragons. Sometimes all it takes is a cave, a scream, and a story nobody can quite bury.
Thanks, Juniper, and I love that email from Tamara because night shift listening is exactly the kind of setting where a story like this gets teeth. And Chris, that Bigfoot item fits tonight better than it first appears because so many creature legends survive in the same strange way. A witness says something stepped out of ordinary life, the official record shrugs, and the woods keep the rest. With the Gowrow, the first half gives us the hunt and the body, but the second half is where the legend refuses to stay buried. After the supposed killing near Blanco, the creature should have ended as a dead monster and a newspaper curiosity. Instead, it spread. It moved out of that one cave in Searcy County and into the larger Ozark imagination, where the Gowrow was no longer just one beast killed by one posse. It became a kind of hidden species, something the hills may have carried in silence for years, hatching in places people did not want to enter after dark. Here's the item I want to pull from the file now. This is a research note tied to Vance Rudolph's collection of Ozark tall tales, especially the material later associated with We Always Lie to Strangers. Randolph's folklore work adds a wonderfully unsettling layer. He found stories suggesting Gowrows had been reported as early as the 1880s before the big Gazette splash of 1897. In those later tales, they were not presented as a single freakish animal. They were a breeding population. The young supposedly hatched from soft-shelled eggs as large as beer kegs, and the mother carried the newly hatched young in a pouch. Now that sounds wild, but folklore often works by making the impossible practical. It gives the monster a life cycle. It explains why one dead Gowrow does not end the matter. If there are eggs, there are nests. If there are nests, there are hidden chambers. And if there are hidden chambers under the Ozarks, then the things Miller Posse killed might have been only one member of a much older family waiting below the rock. Randolph also preserves the Devil's Hole thread, and that part pushes the Gowrow out of Searcy County and into Boone County cave lore. A spelunker supposedly encounters one in that underground world, which is a perfect place for this kind of creature to keep living in the imagination. Caves are already unsettling because they reverse our sense of safety. Up on the surface, we can look around, judge distance, read the sky, and run if we have to. Underground, the world narrows. A flashlight beam becomes your horizon. Every drip sounds close. Every stone scrape might be your own boot, or it might not. Put a 20-foot tusk thing in that environment with webbed clawed feet and a tail built like a blade, and suddenly the Gowrow feels less like a newspaper joke and more like the reason some holes in the earth should be left alone. It is the monster that belongs to the threshold, water and stone, animal and dragon, fact and rumor, newspaper ink, and mountain breath. Now this is where we bring in the skeptical angle because it belongs in the case. Fred W. Alsop, the Gazette editor at the time, later dismissed the story as a great fake, probably without foundation in fact. And the Encyclopedia of Arkansas frames the creature as likely tied to journalism, frontier exaggeration, and tall tale tradition rather than old deep folk belief. That is fair. Newspapers in the 1890s knew the value of a sensational monster, especially one with tusks, a mangled posse member, a cave full of bones, and a missing Smithsonian shipment. But here's what keeps me from simply closing the file with a laugh. Even hoaxes need materials. They need landscape that can hold them. They need local fears, animal losses, cave stories, old reports, and people willing to recognize the shape of the tale when they hear it. Maybe the Gazette polished it until it gleamed. Maybe Miller exaggerated. Maybe the illustration did more work than the evidence. But something in the Ozarks made people keep repeating the name Gowrow long after the ink dried, and that kind of staying power feels like a second set of tracks beside the first. And the tall tale side of the legend almost proves how alive it became. There is the Minya man who claimed he captured a Gowrow by feeding it dried apples until it swelled too large to escape into its burrow, then charged people a quarter to see it. When the paying crowd gathered, he would stagger out from behind a curtain with his clothes torn and announce the beast had escaped. That is funny, yes, but it is also revealing. People paid because they wanted the curtain to open. They wanted, for 1 second, to see whether the old story had a body. And maybe that is why the missing Smithsonian shipment matters so much, because it leaves an empty pedestal where proof ought to be. No specimen tag, no preserved jaw, no crate number, no final museum verdict that lets everybody go home. That is the real afterlife of the Gowrow. Not just a 20-foot monster shot near a cave in 1897, not just an illustration said to come from a photograph, not just a shipment to Washington that never arrived. It is the feeling that the Ozarks may still have sealed rooms beneath them, that water might still move under stone where no map follows it, and that some stories are not killed when the monster dies. They crawl back into the dark, grow horns, and wait for someone else to hear them. So maybe the Gowrow was a monster, maybe it was a tall tale, maybe it was a newspaper creature born from ink and fear. But either way, it left claw marks in the Arkansas folklore.
And I think that's why it works. It's ridiculous enough to make you smile, but just detailed enough to make you glance toward the cave mouth.
I'll be honest, the beer keg eggs are going to stay with me because one monster is bad, a nest is worse.
Exactly, and that's where we leave it tonight, with a cave, a missing body, and a name that sounds like something moving through the dark. Juniper, I'll turn it over to you.
They claimed the beast was killed, photographed, and shipped away. But when the body vanished, the legend finally came alive.
Tonight, we followed the Gowrow from the pages of an 1897 Arkansas newspaper into the caves, creeks, and dark timber of Ozark folklore. We met William Miller, the terrified farms near Blanco, the posse, the cave of bones, the creature with tusks and webbed feet, and the body that supposedly vanished before it ever reached the Smithsonian. And then we followed the legend farther into Vance Randolph's strange folklore threads, the beer keg eggs, devil's hole, and the kind of tall-tale trickery that somehow makes the monster even harder to kill. Thanks for joining us here on The Shadow Frequency. Send your stories, thoughts, and strange little notes from the edge of the woods to the Shadow Podcast at protonmail.com. And you can find our website, of course, at shadowfrequencypodcast.com, and find all kinds of things there. Come back next time when we open another file and follow another strange taste into the dark. You guys want to say goodnight?
Good night, folks. Keep your torches handy. Stay away from suspicious cave mouths. And if someone offers you a quarter look at a captured monster, maybe stand near the exit.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for spending part of your night with us. And remember, sometimes the strangest stories are the ones that refuse to stay buried.
Good night, listeners. Keep your doors locked, your radios tuned, and your ears open for the sound that gave the Gowrow its name. Some things don't need to be seen to be nearby.
This episode was conjured with a solemn vow to explore the unexplained while remaining bound to the truths that have been unearthed. All interpretations are speculative and offered only for your enlightenment and your entertainment.